Welcome to all of our colleagues joining from around the world. My name is Chris Duncombe. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at the International Association of Providers of AIDS Care. It's my honour to moderate today's international session at the 2025 Conference on Stigma. One of the most powerful aspects of the conference is the global community it brings together. These are advocates, researchers, healthcare workers, artists, faith healers, and people with lived experience who are reshaping conversations around stigma around the world. Today's session highlights voices from Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. Please put any comments or suggestions, questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. We begin this session with stigma stories, pre-recorded personal narratives that illuminate the real experiences of individuals and communities affected by HIV-related stigma, mental health stigma, and social exclusion. I'm honoured to introduce our storytellers, Yvette from Uganda, Catherine from Zimbabwe, Madia from Uganda, Olajumoke Damiola, and Audrey from Nigeria. To each of you, thank you for your testimonies, which are also catalysts for change. We can run the video when we're ready.
Hi there, my name is Audrey Mukoro. I am the founder and executive director of Audrey Sickle Cell Foundation and also the South Regional Coordinator for Coalition of Sickle Cell NGOs in Nigeria. So I feel like sickle cell is the most stigmatized, and the reason being that a lot of awareness has not gone into the public about sickle cell. People still think that living with sickle cell is a death sentence, and people still, believe in the myth that says sickle cell warriors are because or stuffs like that. I feel like the condition has not had a lot of spotlight on it, and that's the reason why there's a lot of stigma in the society. But going forward, we can help as a body or even join the government to make policies that will help reduce the stigmatization. Thank you very much.
There are various ways I believe you can thrive beyond these labels. One of them is acceptance. Once you accept the fact that you are living with a particular condition or you are living with a particular ailment, that way you can be able to thrive as someone living with whatever condition it is you are living with. Another way you can thrive is to educate yourself. Once you understand your condition, once you understand what it entails, you are able to fight for yourself outside of the stigma that you are experiencing. And the third way I believe you can thrive beyond this label is for you to belong to a community of like minds, people that are going through what you are experiencing, people that can relate to what you are experiencing, and they are able to tell you that, oh, this is how I experience my, and this is what I do to get better. So these three ways can help you thrive beyond whatever label you are living with or whatever condition you are living with.
Stigma can deeply affect people's confidence, relationships, and even willingness to seek help or be open about it because of what they perceive other people will say about them. So, how do we play a role in reducing this stigma? So we start by actually creating awareness about a certain condition, be it mental health, be it disability, HIV, or whatever condition someone is going through. We start by educating ourselves and other people about a certain condition and how we can deal with it without labeling people who are going through it, because it's stigmatizing. Then what else do we do? Let's be respectful. Let's not just come outright and say so and so is going through this. Let's have some empathy. Even when we're talking to someone, even if we're trying to help them open up, let's have some little bit of empathy that makes someone feel heard and seen if they ever want to talk about something that they feel they are scared to talk about. Let's try to keep the little just open so that someone feels that even though they talk about it, they are welcome. They're not going to be cut off. And then finally, can we create spaces where people feel safe to share their experiences without fear and judgment? And then also the stereotypes. Let's always challenge stereotypes. It's one of the things that is always there. And we're not going to put them away. But if we challenge them, then the way we challenge them, even sometimes it's a way of educating people. When we keep quiet, it's like we are supporting something indirectly.
Hi, I live with sickle cell, and one of my stigma experiences I've had was while on admission, a matron came in and she went, "Why are you here again? Do you want to kill your father?" Like, and I was in pain, and I looked at her and I was like, "Ma'am, I'm in pain. Yeah, I need to see a doctor." And she went, "I know you want to see a doctor, but do you want to kill your father? Why are you here again?" And the tears just kept coming down. Like, I could not believe that a matron would say that I want to kill my father because I was on admission. I was a sickle cell. I'm living with sickle cell, and you're telling me I want to kill my father. For years, I didn't go back to the hospital, and I kept away. But now,
Hi, my name is Chiri from Uganda, and I'm here to answer the question of how to lessen stigma for others. And I would go with talking about mental health openly without leaving anything undone, because the more information we have, the more we are able to understand what stigma is, how to go about stigma, who to talk to, when to talk to them, and all that. And I would also say that supporting each other, supporting your friends, showing up for them, calling them, checking on them, because that little call actually means something to people out here. So, yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. That was very, very, very meaningful. We now move on to our speaker presentations, which blend research, history, and innovative approaches to stigma mitigation across diverse settings. Each presentation adds a critical dimension to our understanding of how stigma operates and how it can be dismantled. Our first presentation is titled The Fourth H That Stigmatized Haitians as a Source of HIV by Marie Denis Luque, founder and executive director of Caring for Haitian Orphans with AIDS. Her work highlights the enduring legacy of HIV stigma and its impact on Haitian communities worldwide. Marie has pre-recorded the presentation. Do we have the recording?
Yes, I have it. One second.
Yeah, take your time. Sorry, yeah. No hurry.
Good morning. My name is Marie Dennis Luque, and I'm pleased to be here with you to share my approach to the discussion on HIV stigma. I've titled my talk, the fourth H that stigmatized Haitians as a risk group for HIV into the US. A little bit about me. I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I have 2 master's degrees in public health from the University of South Florida. While studying public health, I founded a nonprofit in Haiti to deliver care to children living with HIV. I returned to school in 2019 to study public administration with the desire to make a meaningful contribution to the sector in Haiti. I'm now in the data analysis phase of my dissertation. I grew up in Haiti in the 80s, unaware of the AIDS pandemic. When I came to the US in 91, I still had very little knowledge of what was going on. It wasn't until I started college in 1994 that I began to learn about the situation through interacting with students on campus. It wasn't a good thing to be a Haitian or from Haiti, a Haitian from Haiti for that matter. Students in my dormitory from South Florida who obviously understood Haitian Creole and enjoyed everything Haitian were denying their Haitian heritage while claiming ancestry from other Caribbean nations. A few weeks ago, I was sharing with a Haitian American friend that I was participating in this conference. The person who's also from South Florida shared with me that kids during the pandemic in the 90s were bullied. There were violence against them in schools in South Florida. While stigma is not the central focus of my research, I'm honored to be able to share with you a little bit about what we do in my organization and how I see the whole thing. No one can deny that labels play important roles in our lives, from stop signs to food labels that tell us what's in our food and how good or bad they are for our bodies, to mailing labels that ensure our mails reaches their destination. However, when labels are placed on people or groups of people, their effects can be detrimental. The 4-H label, in particular, still carries significant weight for the Haitian people today. The groups identified by the 4-H label, homosexuals, heroin users, hemophiliacs, and Haitians, have historically faced marginalization. This highlights a common societal issue where minority groups are unfairly blamed for broader problems instead of seeking real solutions that support and uplift these communities. Haiti has a complex history. As enslaved people, Haitians fought the French to become the first Black Republic in 1804. Their freedom did not sit well with the West, especially the US. The US occupied Haiti for 19 years, however, has had its hands in Haiti's government ever since. Haiti had its first free democratic election in 1990. This was short-lived. The country has not had a stable government that was not influenced by the US and other Western powers since the first democratic election in 1990 that brought us Jean-Bertrand Aristide. country has a history of severe natural disasters, including earthquakes, hurricanes, tropical storms. The most one that people will remember was the 2010 earthquake that killed a lot of people, maimed many, and claimed a lot of infrastructure. The first, however, recorded major earthquake that happened in Haiti was in 1842 that destroyed Le Palais Sans Souci, the home of King Henri Christophe, located in Milo, Haiti. Now, in addition to persistent political instability since the 1980s, the frequent earthquakes, the frequent hurricane, tropical storms, and of course the big earthquakes that we've experienced in recent few years. Our most recent crises are notorious gangs in the form of a coalition called Vivre Ensemble that has rendered the lives of people in the greater part of the country impossible to live. It's almost been 2 years now since the activities in the capital has been rendered, has come to a complete standstill. According to UNAIDS, an estimated 140,000 people are living with HIV and AIDS in Haiti. However, because of the absence of a functional government, several factors may mask the accurate representation of how the virus is impacting the population. We have the increase of insecurity in the country, which led to an increase in internally displaced people. We have undocumented people from the US, from the Dominican Republic, and some other countries being deported back into Haiti, some of whom have very little ties to the land. The destruction of infrastructure, especially healthcare clinics, facilities, by these gangs and other government facilities. So, and then now you add the dismantling of USAID, which was providing or supporting a lot of the HIV care in the country. So this picture that you see here in terms of the 140,000 people, I surmise that it's even worse than what is presented here. Data from the 2016 to 2017 points to stigma being internalized among 72% of the adult population. PEPFAR has been the invisible hand that has been crucial in fighting HIV and AIDS in Haiti, and it has saved countless lives. And it has afforded us the ability to do the work that we're doing with the children in our care. Despite the increased political instability, significant progress has been made in Haiti. Again, you have the dismantling of USAID, which has created uncertainty in PEPFAR's future, and that many Haitians and also people around the world relied on the funding of this program for life-saving medication. In May 19 of this year, people living with HIV took to the streets in Port-au-Prince, demanding from their government, what is it that they're going to do with them now USAID is no more. The following day, I received a call from an Associated Press reporter asking for my opinion on the issue. After speaking to the reporter, I connected the reporter to the doctor, the head doctor at the hospital where the children received care, and that he was interviewed and shared we had medication up until July 31st of this year. The story aired that Saturday, which was May 24th. On May 29, he sent me a message to let me know that he received a call from somebody important, letting him know that he would receive medication, ARV medications. However, there will not be any support for medical staff, preventive care, or other essential items. Shortly after that, he did receive the medications that was promised, and after inventory, we learned that the medication would last until February 2026. So with the current patient population, that was all the medication that they had. Now, I want to point here that all the children in our care are, their virus is under control, and that we want to keep it that way. And that I'm in this fight not just for my children, I'm also in this fight for everybody in Haiti who has yet to get tested and everybody who needs access to medication. On a positive note, I want to share what we are doing in supporting the lives of children living with HIV. As I shared at the top of this talk, I started a nonprofit. That was 2003. This nonprofit is recognized by both the US and Haiti's government. We're located in Cap-Haïtien, though we were in Port-au-Prince for most of our existence. Because of gang violence, we had to relocate. So we serve children who are living with HIV. We do not take in HIV negative children. And our patient population is about 50% people living with HIV. Now, our approach to this work from the very beginning has focused on combating stigma by creating an environment where the children can be themselves. In our work, we strive to promote self-acceptance and instilling in the children the importance that they hold in Haitian society. To minimize discrimination in care delivery, we hire women living with HIV as direct care providers. Our children are well integrated in their community. They attend regular schools, they worship in the regular churches in the community, they take part in recreational activities with others in the community. The house, there are no signs that this is an orphanage or this is people living with any special condition living there. It's just a normal house. As our children approach 12 or 13 years old, they are made aware that they are living with this condition. And that while our children are in school, they also train with a skill. So for instance, for the past 2 years, our kids have been making their own uniforms to go to school. Now, our kids have been striving for more in that they don't just want to learn like a manual skill per se, they want to go to university. At the present time, we have 3 children in university. We have at 4 years university. So the young man that you see with me in the picture, he was our first. He just completed his first year at school, at university. He's studying social work and international diplomacy. And the other 2, one will be studying business administration. The other one is computer information or informatics. Takeaways. At the beginning of the presentation, I identified the 4 groups that the U.S. claims spread the virus in this country. The first 2 could be categorized as behavior, right? Behavioral led. The third one, medical factors associated with that. The third group, the Haitian people, a nation, nationality, national origin, regardless of how the virus entered the US. it was unjust to have the Haitians, my people, among the high-risk groups named for the situation in this country. Although an apology was issued, the damage had already been done. What lessons did the HIV/AIDS pandemic teach us, and how are we applying this knowledge to prevent future pandemics? The insight gained have contributed to advancements, of course, in surveillance and vaccines, and I can say we're very close to a cure, and blood supply safety, the creation of needle exchange programs, so many important improvements or gains. I'm not sure if some of us or some of our leaders have recognized that we live in a global village. This means that whether we are talking about climate change or a communicable disease like HIV, we are all interconnected. PEPFAR has been effective. However, its future hangs on the balance. Prevention is very important. PrEP is very important. Now, at least in Haiti, right now, what I know is that PrEP is only available to pregnant and lactating women. Now, what happens to the rest of the population in need of this particular item to prevent, or medication to prevent HIV, that are not pregnant or breastfeeding? What about surveillance? Surveillance is very important. What surveillance system or systems are we implementing in Haiti, for instance, to help contain conditions or health conditions or crises as they come up? For instance, the cholera outbreak in the 2010 earthquake. What if it was not contained? It would have made it to U.S. shores in some ways. By limiting access to life-saving medications and preventive measures, I want to say that we continue to perpetuate or reinforce stigma surrounding HIV. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you will share your questions with me as they come up.
Thank you, Marie, for that important perspective and highlighting the Haitian context. Our next speaker is Rifa Sipai, an honors public health and biology student at Los Positos College in California. Rifa will present Better Dead Than Diagnosed, the deadly impact of culturally entwined stigmas on mental health help-seeking behaviours and the suicide rate in India. Rifa, please share your slides when you're ready, and please begin. Yep, that's good.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me all right.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I'll get started. So, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's day is going well and the conference is going well. My name is Rifa. I'm presenting this project on the impact of culturally intertwined stigmas on mental health help-seeking behaviors and the effect that it has on the suicide rate in India. And so, a little bit of background about this project. As mentioned, I am currently a student at Los Positos College in California, and I am part of the honors program. And one of the things that we do in the honors program is we do independent research with our professors. And so last fall, over the span of one semester, around 6 months, I completed this study. And so it was done under the mentorship of my professors, Dr. Roy and Dr. Keller, in the Department of Psychology. And so, for some background, mental health issues in India are a significant public health crisis. Last year, there were over 170,000 suicides recorded, which is a 27% increase since 2018. I personally chose to focus on India due to personal reasons. Being Indian myself, it's something that I've noticed growing up, and then also because despite a changing global shift that is beginning to recognize mental health as a serious health concern, India, along with other Asian countries, is still struggle with a lack of open dialogue, along with access to mental health care. And as we figure out later in the study, it can be traced back to deeply ingrained cultural stigmas. And so, therefore, my study wanted to go a little bit into depth about trying to understand the various ways that these stigmas impact individual attitudes towards seeking mental health care. And essentially, the purpose is simply to educate. I think when it comes to stigma, that's all that we can really do is educate people and hope that by talking about it, we reduce the taboo around it. And so, right there's my research question. So moving on, the first part of my project was my literature review. And so I read various sources and organized the studies and findings into 4 different sections, which I'll go more into depth into. And so the first section I looked into was the nature and scope of mental health stigma in India. And so in this section, I looked into the presence, the different forms, and materializations of mental health stigma in India, which led me to the 3 main types of stigma that I studied. Firstly is public stigma, which is defined as the negative attitudes and beliefs held by the public towards individuals with mental health conditions. And what I found was that because Indian society is so community oriented, the act of seeking mental health help is often viewed as socially disruptive. And so mental illness isn't seen as one individual's struggle, it's seen more as something that reflects on the entire family's honor. And as a result, by one individual choosing to seek mental health help, it was found that it can play a role in damaging the family's social reputations. The next type of stigma that I looked into was self-stigma, which is the negative beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that individuals with mental illness hold about themselves. This one is really interesting because essentially the individuals they adopt the societal prejudices and stereotypes about mental illness that we see in public stigma, but they apply those to themselves. And so the research that I read found a strong correlation between higher levels of self-stigma and increased risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors. And so essentially, the internalized shame that comes with self-stigma becomes a barrier not only to accessing care, but for a lot of individuals to even recognizing that help is needed in the first place. And so self-stigma directly interferes with help-seeking behavior, and those that experience it are more likely to suffer in silence, which increases their emotional isolation and it ultimately increases their risk of suicide. Lastly is structural stigma. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but if we look to the bottom left, I think there is an image there that kind of helps show it. And so it's essentially when laws, policies, and practices within the government themselves and society create and perpetuate negative attitudes and discrimination towards a specific group. And that essentially leads to unequal access to resources and opportunities. And so this is a little bit more unique than the previous 2 types of stigma because it can often be very subtle and so embedded within the structures in place that it is more difficult to identify and to address. And so throughout my readings, I found that in India, structural stigma is deeply embedded within the healthcare system itself. Many services are regarding mental health are underfunded, And then additionally, many healthcare providers receive insufficient training in mental health, which leads to limited availability of support and low quality care, especially in rural and underserved areas. And additionally, one specific study looked into medical professionals, and it found that they themselves carry covert biases against mental illness, whether they were conscious of it or not. And then those biases often surfaced in subtle ways during patient interactions. And so they essentially discouraged individuals from returning for treatment or from seeking it in the first place. And so from all of these readings, what I essentially took away was that these stigmas create a significant pressure to individuals to remain silent, and then that pressure often leads to delay in treatment or the complete avoidance of mental health services, and then so it isolates the individuals when they're most in need of support, which reinforces the cycle of silence. And then moving on, I also want to talk about the cultural and gendered aspects of mental health stigma. So in this section, I read about how cultural norms and gender roles, both of which are tightly woven into Indian society, influence the perception of mental illness, along with individuals' willingness or unwillingness to seek help. And so the research I read consistently shows that women in India experience higher levels of perceived stigma related to mental health, but multiple articles found that there actually wasn't a correlation between higher levels of perceived stigma and more mental illness. And so it essentially reflects the intensified social and familial expectations that are placed in women. In traditional Indian society, gender roles emphasize obedience along with emotional restraint and protection of family honor, especially for women. And so these expectations make women more sensitive to public and self-stigma and make them more likely to internalize shame around their mental health struggles. One particularly harmful consequences of this that was found was the way that mental illness affects women's marital prospects. In many communities, a woman with a known history of mental health issues is often seen as unsuitable for marriage, regardless of her recovery or capacity to lead a fulfilling life. And those cultural beliefs lead many women to hide their symptoms or avoid treatment entirely in order to protect their social status and their family's reputation. And these gendered stigmas contribute directly to the broader patterns that I've discussed. It essentially inhibits help-seeking behavior and it increases emotional isolation and escalates the risk of untreated mental illness. And then in the next section, I turn to mental health literacy, which is essentially refers to one's ability to recognize, understand, and appropriately respond to mental health conditions. And then in the Indian context, there were low levels of mental literacy, and is a key contributor to both public and self-stigma. Essentially, when individuals are unable to identify the symptoms of mental illness as legitimate medical issues, they're more likely to interpret them through cultural or moral lenses, labeling them as weakness, spiritual failure, or personal inadequacy. And then those misrepresentations reinforce stigma and discourage help-seeking behavior. And as a result, many mental health issues often go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, which therefore leads to prolonged suffering and worsening conditions. And then without proper intervention, that delay increases the risk of suicide. And then lastly, for the literature review, I looked into the relationship between the stigma and suicidality. And so stigma in its multiple forms, public, self-structural, doesn't do, doesn't just deter individuals from seeking help, it also becomes a direct driver of suicide risk. Um, and so, as previously mentioned, as individuals often fear being judged or blamed, especially within families or communities, they then begin to view suicide as a moral or familial failure. And then, due to the fear, many choose to not seek help, which leads to emotional isolation, along with social isolation, which is caused by their fear of being labeled, which leads individuals to withdraw from support systems. And so it's also important to recognize that stigma surrounding suicide itself is another barrier to care. Even after the suicide attempt, many individuals do not seek support because they fear being judged or blamed. As in many Indian communities, it was found that suicide is viewed as a moral failing. And so, in the context of this research, the literature makes clear that mental health stigma, when left unchallenged, not only delays treatment but contributes directly to the high suicide rates. And then, in addition to completing that literature review, I also conducted a small qualitative study. And while I won't be covering the full interviews in detail today, do have some quotes from my interviews along with some more data that I think kind of support the findings from the literature. And so a little bit about my study. It was really small. It was 10 participants. I used purposeful sampling. And so one thing that I wanted from all participants were that they were either connected to the Indian culture in some way or they had like previously lived in India. And so they either grew up or spent an extended period of time there. And then they were ages 16 to 40, and there were 5 female and 5 male. And so these are some examples of the interview questions I asked. I asked, starting with demographics, essentially just to understand their connection to the culture, how recent it is. And then I asked questions in each of the literature review sections. And then these are some general findings. I thought this was interesting. So, out of the 10 participants that I interviewed, 9 of them stated that they did struggle with their mental health. There was one participant that did not struggle with their mental health. And then, out of those 9 that say that they did struggle with their mental health, all 9 say that they did not seek professional help. Again, I thought that was very interesting. And then these are 3 questions that I noticed. Pretty much all the participants answered very similarly. And so the first one is, how comfortable are you discussing mental health issues with family? Out of my 10 participants, all 10 stated that they were not comfortable. Many of them cited that due to um, the essential stigma around it, that their family would be one of the last places that they feel comfortable discussing their mental health issues with, and that they would prioritize friends or other social bonds. The next question was, do you think stigma around mental health contributes to India's high suicide rate? Additionally, all 10 participants said yes, and they cited various examples from their own experiences. And then lastly, have you ever personally felt stigma or seen others face stigma for discussing or seeking mental health help? Out of the 10 participants, I believe 8 said that they knew somebody or had seen somebody face stigma, and 2 said that they had experienced it themselves. And so these are some quotes from my interviews that really stuck out to me. And so the question was, have you ever heard of someone being encouraged not to seek mental health treatment? What were the reasons given? And this interviewee responded, yes, I believe social stigma was the main reason. If it got out that they were seeking a therapist, what would people think of them and how it would ruin their chances of marriage along with their reputation? And this further supports what I previously discussed, how public stigma is quite collective and it's seen as a reflection of an entire family's honor rather than just the individual. And then this is the next quote. This one's a little bit long, but it really stuck out to me. The question was, how do you think Indian society typically responds to suicide, and does this response affect others' willingness to seek help? And this interviewee said, I don't think that the reaction people show to suicides would really positively impact someone's decision to get help, because there are a lot of symptoms when someone is going through mental health struggles, and people see these symptoms, but they ignore them, hoping that they will go away. And so when somebody does commit suicide, the same people will give out empty blessings, like what a tragedy, if only we had seen this coming, but they did, and everybody knows that they did, and so it feels very inauthentic, and it doesn't give people who are currently struggling the push that they need to go seek help. And so this supports what was previously cited in the literature, that stigma often creates a cycle. When people respond to suicide with inauthenticity, pretending that they never saw the symptoms, it sends a message to those that are currently struggling that their struggles will be ignored anyway. And so it pushes others to hide their struggles, believing that it won't matter if they speak up. And so through the interviews, I essentially came to the conclusion that the impact of these stigmas is a cycle. The more that people hide their struggles and pain, the more invisible that mental illness itself becomes, and it makes professional help seem both unreachable and also culturally unacceptable. Ultimately, I believe the research shows that without confronting those intertwined social beliefs, especially around things like gender and honor, meaningful progress in suicide prevention and mental health access will remain out of reach. So thank you, and thank you to my professors for assisting with this project.
Thank you, Rifa, for addressing a topic that remains deeply urgent across global mental health, but particularly from the Indian perspective. Our final speaker is Ikenna Nkwama, Technical Lead at the Nigerian Network of Religious Leaders Living with or Personally Affected by HIV/AIDS, who will present efficacy of a faith-based stigma mitigation intervention, 1-year outcomes from an implementation for religious leaders living with HIV in Nigeria. Ikenna, when you're ready, can you share your slides and start? Yep, that's perfect.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Yeah, we can. Yep.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ikenna Nkwama. I'm the technical lead. I'm the technical lead for NINERELA. Today, I'm presenting our study evaluating faith-based stigma mitigation intervention for religious leaders living with HIV in Nigeria. This work reflects the unique intersection of faith, psychosocial support, and community-led public health transformation. At this point, I want to briefly introduce NINERELA, the organization that is leading this work. NINERELA is the Nigerian network of religious leaders living with or personally affected by HIV. For nearly 2 decades, the network has mobilized religious leaders across faith, denominations, and regions to transform faith into stigma-free spaces and a place of refuge. Our work blends spirituality, psychosocial support, advocacy, and evidence-based tools. This study builds on the long-standing commitment of our organization by providing a structured model for dealing and leading support in the mitigation of stigma. As a background, we know that religious leaders living with HIV occupy a difficult position. They are spiritual guides, yet many struggle privately with internalized stigma, fear of disclosure, and anticipated stigma from their congregations. This dynamic undermines their personal well-being and severely limits their ability to champion as stigma champions and to reduce stigmas within their congregations. We know that faith institutions are powerful. They shape norms, beliefs, and attitudes. However, they can either reinforce stigma or dismantle it. Many HIV-related narratives in faith contexts still carry the moral judgment. But when leaders feel empowered, evidence shows that faith spaces can become channels of compassion and acceptance and a place of healing for those who are suffering from this stigmatizing scenario. This study advances the question of what happens when religious leaders living with HIV are supported to heal and then empowered to lead. For the objectives, we sought to evaluate the one-year impact of our stigma mitigation intervention from religious leaders living with HIV, and the impact was assessed in 3 core areas. One, to assess how it mitigated internalized stigma and anticipated stigma among the religious leaders who were participants in our intervention. Also, to assess antiretroviral therapy adherence and positive living outcomes among that cohort of religious leaders who were beneficiaries of that intervention. And then to look at the programmatic and policy implications of that model we tested. Together, these outcomes help us to understand the level of impact of that intervention. Then, talking about our intervention, our model combines structured learning with psychosocial and spiritual support. Participants in this intervention completed a 6-week short course using the Nerella Stigma Mitigation Toolkit. It includes models on reframing stigma, on coping skills, on self-disclosure, and advocacy. They also received the National Validated Stigma HIV Sermon Guide. So just talk about the Sermon Guide. The Sermon Guide is a faith-based document that actually provided religious context to every element in the HIV response, such that you can back up every element of the intervention with religious verses to make it both religiously acceptable and also medically acceptable. So they received this sermon guide, which also helped them to communicate effectively in their congregations during their sermons. The participants also remain connected through the monthly virtual meetings and also through peer-to-peer support groups and also through a mentoring section where we are prepared to work as HIV chaplains. This multifaceted approach emphasized both internal healing and external influence. Then looking at our methodology for the assessment. So we applied a quasi-experimental pre and post design assessment method, which is well suited for a real-world community-based intervention. So from March 2023 through February 2024, we enrolled 98 religious leaders living with HIV across Christian and Muslim traditions, both lay and ordained religious leaders. They are part of this intervention. We assessed at baseline the stigma using an adapted Bezier stigma scale, which measured self-perception, role as religious leaders, anticipated stigma, blame, shame, disclosure patterns, ART adherence, and also we conducted 12 in-depth interviews to enrich our qualitative findings. So this design allowed us to capture the meaningful behavioral and psychosocial shift over time. Just to state that also that this intervention was carried out in 3 states in Nigeria. That was in Lagos State, in Kaduna State, and in Kogi State. So these are 3 states where these interventions were carried out. For our results, Our results were both statistically significant and also programmatically meaningful. Internalized stigma dropped sharply from a score of 118 at baseline to a score of 92 after 1 year assessment, which is a large effect size, indicating strong psychosocial improvement. Willingness to disclose HIV status doubled from 27% at baseline to 55%. So women showed a higher relative gains of this in terms of willingness to disclose. Adherence to antiretroviral therapy increased from 72% to 88%, suggesting that as stigma decreased, self-care was strengthened. Importantly, 66% of the participants became HIV chaplains, meaning that they moved from internal healing to outward leadership. And where the sermon guide was used, congregational anticipated stigma reduced by 28%. For leadership transformation, this slide represents one important outcome in our finding, in our intervention. Post-intervention, 2/3 of the participants were functioning as HIV chaplains, where they support other persons who are living with HIV with spiritual care, and also in some cases use their own lived experience to help them to adjust to the new realities of their status, and also to help them stick to treatment, to promote treatment adherence. Also, 72% of them were part of our advocacy team. We are advocating for stigma reduction in faith communities. 28%, of course, talked about reduction in anticipated stigma. We also saw a substantial increase in their confidence to speak publicly against stigma and also to promote the U equals to U campaign. I suppose we know the U equals to U campaign, which actually talks about undetectable equals to untransmissible, which is more like a statement of hope for people who are living with HIV. And the measurable decline in anticipated stigma confirms that their transformed sense of self had tangible leadership effect in their communities. So overall, the intervention demonstrated strong effectiveness. It affirmed that addressing stigma from within faith systems is not only possible, it is also powerful. Our findings align with global evidence that internal stigma or internal healing can catalyze external transformation. And when religious leaders heal, their congregations actually feel the impact, they follow, and they can use their stories to create the right impact. And the scalability of the intervention makes it a strong model for national and regional adoption, especially in countries where faith institutions shape public perception. For the policy and practice implication, 4 major implications emerged. One is on the scalability. So this model can be expanded across other faiths. This model can be used, you can use this model and implement it in any of the faiths across the globe. Also, integration can be seen in other health issues. For example, we can actually copy this model to address other stigma issues like TB stigma, like mental health stigma, like gender-based violence stigma. We can still use this model to address these other forms of stigma. The findings support incorporating faith stigma into the faith-based HIV intervention into the national and sub-national HIV response. And the intervention also aligns with UNA's and PEPFAR's priorities for community-led responses. In closing, our study demonstrates something profound, that when religious leaders living with HIV experience healing, empowerment, and peer support, they become powerful instruments of change. Also, that faith becomes a source of healing and not harm. When actually make faith-based interventions a part and parcel of our public health intervention. This model shows that stigma can be dismantled from the inside out using the very institution that once reinforced it. And with this, I say thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Akina. Can you quit? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. I don't see any questions in the chat. I see one comment from Dorian in Cape Town. Thank you for shedding light on this unspoken truth. As a person living with HIV for 20 years and a HIV activist, it is stigma that leads people to not adhere to their medication and shying away from society. So yeah, I think that's a very important point. Yeah. Just looking at the chat. I had a question for Rifa and Ikenna. How do you see where is it? How can we improve cross-country learning so that successful stigma mitigation models are shared globally? Would either of the panelists like to just make some general comments about sharing?
Yeah, I think ways such as this conference is a great way to have discussions about stigma. As I previously mentioned, stigma, it can be combated really easily by talking about it. And so I think more conferences like this one that encourage individuals from various countries to share their perspectives and to share the work being done can really allow for more conversation, which can help reduce stigma.
Thanks, Rifa. Ikenna, you have any comments about sharing your work outside of Nigeria or sharing the work that you heard from India or from Haiti?
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. Definitely, the stigma actually thrives when it's actually kept in the dark. We need to really unmask it by sharing this model across the globe. And one interesting thing about the model we are sharing is that it is something that can be replicated any part of the world. Wherever you have faith communities, you can use that vehicle to change the narrative, be it for stigma against mental health, against TB, against anything at all. We realize or recognize that faith communities wield very important powers and very strong influence, and we can make faith transformational by using them to address these issues. Bearing in mind that at one point in time, faith was actually the driver of stigma, that you can make it transformational and also use it as a vehicle to correct the narratives. So I think it's important for us to expand the conversation across the globe because what affects one at one part of the world can affect one at the other part of the world.
Thank you. I think I still don't see any questions. Oh, here we go. A question for Ikenna. This is great work. Do you think the model can integrate any sensitization and stigma reduction related to gay men, a community with high HIV burden in Nigeria?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Right. So what we've done over time, like we know that definitely faith again is a major factor in the conversation, even in Nigeria. In the same way, we can use the same faith platforms to address this stigma across all the different platforms and all the different religions. We've done a couple of work in terms of the sexual minority and other people. So we feel that this same model can also be used to address issues with the stigma related to gay men in Nigeria and across the globe.
Thank you. I had a question from Dorian. What are the practical ways we can combat the scourge of stigma? That's a question to both panelists.
Okay, if I should start. So
Yeah.
practical ways to combat the scourge of stigma is telling the stories in the right way, helping those who are um, bearing the burden of stigma to come out of it. I feel that when, for example, using HIV stigma as an example, when people who are living with HIV are helped to live openly, it disarms people who use HIV as a way to subdue them. So I feel disclosure, telling the right stories, and sharing experiences is very important. Let me share a story. Some time ago, we had an outreach with religious leaders living with HIV. And this was a very bold move we made. They went to congregations to tell their story that I am a pastor and I've been living with HIV for 18 years. That actually broke the huge silence. So we need to recruit people who have this boldness to unmask stigma, to unmask HIV, so that their stories can change the narrative. Lived experience is important, and telling the right story is important. Thank you.
I
So I think
agree. I
yeah.
also think a really important thing is to try and keep an open mind. I feel like there's so many misconceptions or assumptions that people sometimes make when they're not fully educated on a topic. And so I think keeping an open mind and being open to hearing these stories is something that is also very important and I think everybody can do.
Thank you, everybody. I think we're just about a little bit over time. So as we close, I want to thank our speakers and storytellers for sharing their work today. The session reminds us, I think, of the global interconnectedness of stigma and the global power of resilience, advocacy, community, and religious leadership. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.